In this lesson, we will solve quadratics by completing the square. Remember, the best way to do this is when b is an even value. So first, let's just practice to find the appropriate c value, which will come into play when we start completing the square. So to find the c value that we would like to have, we take our b value in half, which is why it's nice when b is even, and then square it. So for instance, in this case, b is negative 14. I'm going to take that in half and then square it. Negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49. So my c value would be positive 49. C values are always positive because whether we multiply a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive, our product is positive. For my second, I would take b divided by 2, which is of course 4 squared, which is 16. So those would be my c values. Now what's going to happen next is we are then going to rewrite this as x squared minus 14x plus 49. And this c value that we find actually makes this a perfect square, and a perfect square can be written as the square root of the first term and the square root of the second term, which is whatever is in here, so minus 7 squared. So that's why we're doing this, why we're finding that c value. Again, this would be a 16 here instead of a c, and that would factor into x plus 4 because it was a positive 4 and this was positive. So notice these are the same signs, and then squared. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to follow these steps, and I've written them on the slide for you. We start hopefully by having just a 1 in front of the x squared, if possible. Then I'm going to move my 13 to the opposite side. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared minus 6x. I'm going to leave a plus blank. I'm going to subtract 13 from each side to get rid of this one. So negative 13 plus blank. To find what goes in the blank, I'm going to find the c values. So complete the square by finding the new c, which we do by taking our b value in half and squaring it. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Squared gives me 9. So that's the value that's added here and here. Now we're going to use the square root property because this is now a perfect square. So I'm rewriting this as x minus 3 quantity squared. And then of course negative 13 plus 9 is negative 4. And I'm going to use the square root property to find that x minus 3 equals plus or minus 2i. And then of course add 3 to each side, which gives me 3 plus or minus 2i, which of course is 3 plus 2i and 3 minus 2i. For my next, again, I'm looking first at the GCF here. I'm going to divide everything by 2 if possible. If I divide every single term by 2, I can certainly do it this way. I would not be able to do that if my GCF had an x in it, so please don't do it that way. So here I would end up with x squared plus 10x, and on the same step I'm going to move this. Now this is a minus 5. I'm going to add 5 to each side. So leave the plus blank and the plus blank. To find the blank, I take my b value divided by 2 and square it, which gives me 5 squared or 25. This side factors into a perfect square of x plus 5. Remember that 5 comes from right here. This side is 30. Now I'm going to take the square root of each side. The square root of this side gives me x plus 5. The square root of 30 really cannot be broken down. So it's just plus or minus the square root of 30. I could break it into 5 and 6, but neither are perfect squares. 3 and 10, neither are perfect squares. So then of course I'll just subtract that 5 to leave me with x equals negative 5 plus or minus radical 30. Again, if they want you to write it as 2 solutions, then you would write negative 5 plus radical 30 and negative 5 minus radical 30. Here's one for you to try on your own, so press pause, try the question, then press play to check your work. Notice there's no value in front of the x squared. That makes us happy. So let's rewrite this as x squared minus 4x plus blank equals negative 16 plus blank by subtracting the 16 from each side. Find the value that goes in the blank by taking b, which is negative 4, and squaring. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. On the left side, that gives me x minus 2, quantity squared. On the right side, that gives me negative 12. When I take the square root, that leaves me with x minus 2 equals plus or minus, and then 12, again, I would break that down into 4 and 3, which would of course leave me with 2I radical 3. And then I would add the 2 to each side, which leaves me with 2 plus or minus 2I radical 3.